So your protein skimmer's working great and doing its job, but then the pump fails or needs maintenance, the skimmer cup overflows, it's running but not collecting anything, it's leaking or spilling outside the sump, it's stripping away that coral food or bacteria additive you just added, and the list goes on. All of these are 100% avoidable, and today I'll not only show you how to solve these potential skimmer issues and more, but using a Neptune Apex, you'll see how with just a few minutes of time and a handful of quick Apex tasks, your protein skimmer can be a better tool beyond filtration alone and can actually make your tank safer and more successful. Hi guys, Randy here with the BRStv guide to Mastering Your Neptune Apex Controller, where we show you how to use the Apex to improve your equipment's performance and avoid inevitable failures, because ignoring the inevitable puts you on the inevitable path. Today we're talking protein skimmers and how to use the Apex to improve its performance, increase safety, protect from failures, make maintenance much easier, and actually save you some money along the way. I'll show you how to tackle the most common skimmer issues that afflict almost every single reefer at some point, but more importantly, you'll see how easy it is to set up a handful of Apex alerts and tasks to avoid them all in the first place, and in the end, I've got a hack that you can use so your skimmer cup will never overflow again, no matter what. I counted about a dozen potential skimmer issues that we're going to solve today with the Apex, maybe even a couple you might not have thought were issues to begin with, let alone know that you could solve them. Starting with the most common and easiest to fix problem that reefers face within some skimmers, and that is stopping them from overflowing and spewing nasty fish poo and waste when your return pump is off and the water level in the sump rises, which often creates more maintenance tasks like water changes. I say this is the easiest to solve because this layer of protection is automatically built into the task functions for setting up a skimmer from the beginning. By walking through the initial 6-step process to add your skimmer, you actually solve 3 things at once. First, you name your skimmer outlet so it's easier to ID. Second, your skimmer is tied to your return pump, so if your return is off, your skimmer is off as well. And third, it creates a 5-minute or longer delay before the skimmer powers back on, which allows for your sump level to return to normal. With all 3 of these covered, you basically eliminate any chance that you overflow your skimmer cup again during water changes, maintenance, or after the occasional power outage. The next easiest thing we can do with the Apex is help protect our skimmer investment through immediate alerts and notifications for when it might need maintenance, when the pump or venturi air intake might be clogged, or even if the pump's failed completely. Again, a simple tasks function solves all 3 of these potential issues through monitoring your skimmer pump's power or wattage draw, which can actually alert you if the pump is not working as intended, such as it's drawing 0 or near 0 power, meaning it's completely dead or nearly there. Something often overlooked is that the skimmer is clogged with buildup and can actually draw less power than normal, telling you it needs maintenance. Or your skimmer can draw more power than usual if your venturi is blocked or clogged, meaning less air into your skimmer and diminished performance. To set up these skimmer protections, we find the power usage alarm task, select your skimmer outlet, and pick a minimum and maximum wattage draw that will send you an alert when the skimmer operates outside of those ranges. The easiest way to do this is let the Apex select the ranges for you, which it does automatically based on the last 24 hours of power usage history. You can come back and run the task again to make adjustments. That's really all there is to it. We've just set up power monitoring for our skimmer, which not only applies if you have an in-sump skimmer, but for those with an external recirculating skimmer, you can also apply this to your secondary feed pump for the same protection and monitoring. While we're on the subject of protecting our investments and ultimately saving money long-term, let's talk about those coral foods, amino acids, additives, or bacteria that many of us choose to dose our tanks. Not only do those foods and additives cost money, but we also want to maximize their effectiveness in the tank. However, with the skimmer running and potentially pulling them out, we need a solution to turn the skimmer off for just a few minutes. This is where the Apex feed modes come in handy, and setting one up to turn our skimmer off for 15 minutes while dosing is as easy as clicking the cogwheel icon in the skimmer outlet, adding in the line if feed A 15 then off above the defer statement, and hitting the send button. If 15 minutes doesn't work for you, or you want a different feed mode for coral feeding or dosing, you can choose feed mode A through D, or change the length of time the skimmer is off, anywhere from 1 to 999 minutes. It's as simple as that. So I don't know if you've been keeping track, but I've already counted at least 6 super common headaches that we've prevented with the Apex by just using 3 basic setup features. But there's even more out there that we can solve, not only through the use of alerts, but by actually having the Apex do something about them when we're not around the tank to do it ourselves. Let's find out what those are by tapping into a few of the Apex add-ons or accessories. So I think we can all agree that a reefer's worst nightmare is water on the floor when you don't expect it. Whether it's an overflowing skimmer cup that's spilled over the sump or an external skimmer plumbed outside the tank, knowing that water is not where it should be the moment it happens is 100% better than discovering it later after potential damage. The Apex fix for this potentially devastating issue is the Neptune LDK or leak detection kit and a quick 6-step task function for adding it to your toolbox of prevention. Once you plugged in your FMM module and placed your leak sensors in spots where a potential leak might occur, all you need to do is run the LDK task, choose your FMM, choose 2 sensors in ports 1 and 2, and hit send. Not only will you now get notified when the sensors trigger from water on the floor, but we can actually take this to the next level by automatically doing something about it by telling our skimmer to shut off if a leak is detected, potentially stopping further leaking until you can get there and fix the issue. To make this happen, all you need to do is click the skimmer outlet cog icon and add in a new line of text above the defer statement. For me and the current name of my sensor, that line reads, if my sensor name closed, then off. Your sensor name might be slightly different, but the key is to tell your skimmer that if your sensor's closed, turn yourself off, which is something that you can copy and paste with any leak sensor you've added. Here's a tip for you. If you want to make the sensors even easier to identify before adding them to the skimmer outlet, I highly suggest you rename them first to something that makes more sense. To do that, just click the tiles icon on your dashboard, find the 4 new switches created when you added the FMM, bring them down onto the dashboard and rename them something like I've done here with Leak 1, Leak 2, Optic 3, or Flow 4. Now I know exactly what type of sensor is plugged into which respective FMM port, making them easier to ID and easier to use. So now when I add them to my skimmer outlet, I can just write, if Leak 1 closed, then off. Just like that, not only did we solve potential skimmer leaks, but for a majority of reefers, now we've covered over 80% of the potential skimmer issues that you might ever encounter, but there's still a handful of issues that you might be leaving on the table depending on your setup. Things like preventing an overflowing skimmate receptacle, dialing in an optimal flow rate for your recirculating feed pump, monitoring and controlling a CO2 scrubber and related tank pH, using ORP monitoring to know if your skimmer is doing its job. And don't forget that skimmer hack that I promised earlier to completely stop your skimmer from overflowing ever again. Let's talk about using optical sensors with the FMM ports to help solve your skimmer from overflowing in higher than normal sump levels, or using them to alert you when your skimmate collector reservoir is full, ready to be cleaned, as well as shutting off your skimmer from filling up that reservoir even more. Regardless of what you're using your optical sensors for, the first thing we want to solve is to shut off your skimmer when your optical sensor is triggered from a high water level or full skimmate reservoir, in which case we follow the same process we did for the leak detection sensor, only this time I'm adding a line above the defer statement that says, if Optic 3 closed, then off. Again, Optic 3 is what I named my sensor, and yours might be different, but don't forget, we also want to be notified when the sensor is triggered, which is as simple as clicking the cog icon above your email outlet and adding in the line that says, if Optic 3 closed, then on. Now when the sensor is triggered, your skimmer will turn off and your alert will turn on, meaning you will get push notifications in the Apex Fusion app or email or a text straight to your phone. For those of you using a flow sensor on your recirculating skimmer feed line or feed pump, getting alerted when your flow is below or above your target is even easier, because all you need to do is plug the sensor into the FMM port, find the flow sensor task function, and the Apex will walk you through 7 steps to choose the size of the meter you installed and choose a minimum and maximum flow rate that will notify you when your skimmer pump falls outside of those ranges. The next few skimmer problem solvers don't necessarily need programming to set up or to implement, but by using them and monitoring pH or ORP coupled with some alerts, they can help provide you with a window into your skimmer's performance and help troubleshoot or eliminate your skimmer as a potential tank issue. The first first one is using pH monitoring and alerts, specifically if you choose to run a CO2 scrubber with your skimmer to control your tank pH, whereby using a low or high pH alarm, you can tell when your CO2 media is depleted and needs changed, or if something terrible went wrong with your skimmer causing pH to spike, you could shut off your skimmer completely. Setting up a high and low pH alarm is a simple 5-step task function called probe alarm, where you can choose your pH probe set to a low parameter like 7.8 or 7.9 and a high parameter like 8.5, and it's done. If I want to turn my skimmer off when the pH does wind up that high, you can simply add a line into your skimmer outlet above the defer statement that says, if pH greater than symbol 8.5, then off. In relation to that, using ORP as a touch point for skimmer performance, if your skimmer's functioning but maybe tuned poorly or was bumped or changed somehow where it's not really removing anything, if left long enough, organics could begin to build up in the tank and related ORP could see a trend downward with it. In this case, you can walk through the same probe alarm task and set your ORP probe alerts when your tank drifts outside of normal ranges. Normal ranges are automatically populated for you when choosing your ORP probe alarm, so it's best to give your probes some time to determine what they are before setting them up. So far, just by adding a Protein Skimmer to the Apex, we've reduced potential floor damage from leaks, increased the longevity and life of our skimmer pump, stopped nasty skimmate spillage, and dialed in our skimmer performance, while at the same time added numerous layers of monitoring and redundancy that made our Protein Skimmer better than it was before on its own, as well as made it safer for our home and tank. But there's one surefire trick to stop skimmer overflowing once and for all that I refuse to skip when setting up a skimmer on my Apex, and that's by installing a float switch in the lid to turn my skimmer off when the cup is full and tell me it's time to empty it. In most cases, using a float switch with your skimmer will require a little DIY to drill the skimmer lid and install the vertical float switch of your choice. But once you've got that done, you can install the switch into a Neptune breakout box and you're ready to go. To add the switch to your skimmer and alerts, you can find the switch in your unused tiles. Here my float switch is number 1 in my breakout box, which is the SW1 tile I've pulled down to my dashboard. Now you can rename the switch something like I did, like Skim Full, save it, and head to your Protein Skimmer outlet to add in the line above the defer statement that says, if Skim Full closed, then off. Depending on the float switch that you used for your skimmer, when it's in the down position, it might be either open or closed. If it is, you can either turn the float over so that it's closed when up, or just go adjust the skimmer outlet line that we added accordingly. Now, much like the optical sensor alerts and alarms we previously added, if you want your Apex to send you a notification when the cup is full and needs to be emptied, you can simply add in another line into that email outlet that reads, if Skim Full closed, then on. This function enabled, you'll probably never overflow your skimmer again, and actually might be more aware when it's time to be clean, which is something that I find super valuable every time I use it, much like these other super valuable tips for return pumps that we cover in this next episode over here, or all the valuable tips in the full Mastering Your Neptune Apex series playlist right over here.